I'm Jen Collings, and I'm an educational developer at the University of Plymouth, but I lead on inclusive teaching, learning and assessment, and have done for quite a while now. I'm just going to give you a brief tour into a flavour of our philosophy behind assessment, because we've really done a lot of work on inclusion at the university. So, my work is a lot about challenging myths. There's a lot of myths about assessment. You've got to have exams have got to be 80% exams, 20% coursework. There's loads of myths. Oh, inclusion equals easier. No, that's not the case. So it is an interesting and at times challenging subject to be working on. But where we're going for is we're actually at the university, we're really keen that assessment is meaningful and students can engage in it. Students, dare I say, are almost excited by the learning they can get from assessment, rather than it be something that I do to them, they suffer and they get some marks for. So I think it's really important. We're not going to get equality, but what we're going to get is equitable learning experience. And I think I just wanted to really emphasise that at the start. Why? I really think David Bowd in Australia, really in the front of assessment in Australia, and just saying how slow assessment is to change. And actually assessment is not equipped students for future lives. And actually the QAA tells us we need have inclusive design, we need to look at inclusion within our design of assessment. So why at Plymouth? In 2012 I conducted a review of assessment, and it was, our feedback was there's inconsistent practice. We had excellent examples of excellent practice and other areas not. Student voice has been really loud, and worked with Steph and with her predecessors on looking at developing assessment through feedback. Traditionally, nationally, we know that student scores for feedback and assessment are low compared to everything else. And also, we're really keen to develop student retention through meaningful assessment and feedback. Feedback is as important as assessment. How am I going to learn from that experience? And at Plymouth, we have large numbers of disabled students. That's just the disclosed disabled students. So, and with the reduction of the disability student allowance in 2015 and subsequently 2016, we've really had to look at the cost of modified provision and look at how we approach this. So firstly, I just wanted to talk to you about student voice. So yes, in green, we really would like in NSS our quality comments to say get feedback within a matter of hours. This is real, this isn't made up by the way. And formative marking, and there's meaning, students can improve. However, at times we still get that quote at the top that the coursework was updated and difficult because it had no meaning to the future. So we really look, in our teaching and learning support, we're really keen to use data, and both quantitative and qualitative, to work with programs and students to develop assessment. Our inclusive approach isn't new. Anybody who's worked around inclusion will know Waterfield and West, who worked at Plymouth and really were forerunners of an inclusive approach, an approach that doesn't make students with additional needs feel othered, but actually it's an approach that is open for all students, and not just disabled students. We've got lots of international students, students with full-time employment. How are we going to ensure that the way we assess is inclusive for our diverse student population? So in 2014, myself and Professor Pauline Neal, we were tasked with updating and rewriting the assessment policy. That was in 2014. And here's just a sample of it. I urge you to go and look at it. However, most important, I want to show you that in 2016, as a result of a teaching and learning project on examination feedback, we updated the assessment policy, teaching and learning committee, and the academic regs agreed that actually the last point is that all assessments will receive feedback, and that's including examinations. The only exams that students don't get feedback on is that final year, final exam. But all through there, we need to ensure that our students are learning from exams. So as a result of developing that policy, we developed a diagram which actually encapsulates our philosophy about assessment and feedback. Feed-in, incredibly important to ensure that our students are thoroughly prepared. What does good look like? What do we mean by some of our feedback? You know, getting students to mark previous work, getting students familiar with marking criteria, assessment criteria. Exams are all about anxiety. So if we get students to practice, prepare, and really become familiar, we want to take the anxiety out of all assessments. Then looking at feed forward and formative feedback, which Sue has alluded to, actually looking at how can we get students to, if you want, self-regulate their work as they're writing it, but also formatively look at it. Now, if you've got a cohort of 350, we're not expecting staff to do that, but there's been a really interesting project in marine biology where students peer-reviewed their work midway, and that cohort of students who were in that research project got consistently a grade higher than the students who didn't peer-review each other's work. So there's lots of real innovation happening at Plymouth around assessment as a whole. So, and then feedback. How do we deliver feedback? Because if we deliver it through a pigeonhole and written, handwritten, A, can I read it, and B, I'm not going to go and pick it up. So again, there's lots of innovative work about students getting feedback through YouTube, through MP3, and lots of different ways we're looking at how do we ensure students actually act on the feedback. And what are they going to do next year? It's a long time between May and October, so lots of interesting work by academics who are running exam workshop feedbacks in October, looking at the scripts, looking at, well, what am I going to learn from that feedback? Not across the board yet, but actually there's some really exciting stuff happening at the university. So, what are we telling staff? So it's about design, aligning learning outcomes to criteria, looking at a range of methods. This whole thing about being outward facing and work related is really important. And opportunities to practice, to progress, and timetable. Are we timetabling assessment literacy and feedback literacy in the timetable so students can practice? The advice is that we should have a maximum of 50% for weighting. The days of 80-20 on, hopefully are fading. In the past, people would say to me, Jane, I need to do it because of the professional bodies. So we contacted the professional bodies, and the answer, you didn't have to do that. We're not talking about making it easier. The learning outcomes and the professional competencies stick. So, but we're talking about how we prepare students for that assessment, whether it's against professional competencies or professional body requirements. There has been quite a lot of over-assessment, so we're looking at avoiding over-assessment. Right, what methods? We've got loads of different resources for staff to look at, and what we're trying to encourage staff to do is to develop more modern, up-to-date, work-facing types of assessment. And the same with exams. There's a lot of work been done on inclusive exams, looking at how can we make exams more work-related. So an example would be in law, where they they brief the students at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, some case, and then they've got to go off and do the work, then come back at 10 o'clock in the morning and reply to that real life case under exam conditions but open book, trying to make it far more work related. Plus the fact that we need to ensure that students are well prepared and know their timetable, so that if they've got caring responsibilities or employment responsibilities, they can organise their personal schedule so they've got time to revise and get their work ready for that deadline. Just want to say, online at Plymouth we've got a huge amount of resources. If you haven't visited our teaching and learning pages and our assessment pages, everything that I'm going to give you a quick view of now is online. And I also bought one set of all the resources I've looked at, so anybody can have it as one set of resources. But I just want to show you, we've got an inclusive assessment guidance, 20 pages of guidance, but included in it is actually looking at what methods can I use for what am I trying to assess. We get staff to actually map a module. What are the learning outcomes? What are the professional requirements? Any assessment criteria? Then how and when are you going to formatively assess it and summatively assess it? So they map how they're going to do it and how they're going to deliver feedback. It's an example of a resource that we have. Then we get the team to map each module, and there might be different risk factors, but actually map each module onto a program, onto a year program. So they get the balance. They get the balance of different methods and actually start to see, oh gosh, we've got 5 pieces of group work all at the same time. Well, that's not good. And through that, we can look at actually timetabling and scheduling assessment across the piece. Want to try and avoid bottlenecks and shorten assessments, because if you're going to develop, if you've got a 3-hour exam, if a student's got 100% extra time, that's 6 hours of examination time plus an hour's break. That's just not, feasible really. So we're really looking at scheduling, programming, and trying to stop the use of end of August resets, because a lot of our students would have to come back from overseas for that time. And we've got a planner to, again, help staff do it. All this is online. I just want to also say that over the last 18 months, we've really moved our focus onto the importance of feedback, and Sue alluded to this. So actually using the same model, feedback being really important, but actually to try and get students to engage in the feedback. What do we mean by critical analysis? What do we mean by synthesis? How can we actually get students to engage and improve? So we're looking at integrating, people talk a lot about assessment literacy, I talk a lot about feedback literacy, getting students together in groups saying, well, what am I going to do with this feedback? How am I going to improve my next piece of work? Absolutely vital if we want students to learn from the process. So lots of activities, we give staff lots of examples, maybe to put annotated work on Moodle, on the DLE, introduce students to feedback, get them to comment on past work, get them to actually give feedback to their peers formatively, and if possible, more assessments marked by students or staff and peer review. So we're really keen to get student learning, and we've got some really good examples. So things like tourism and hospitality, they have immediate feedback after online exams, model answers, and the dental school has done amazing work with same-day feedback on both practical and written exams. and consequently, as you'll see in a minute, their NSS scores are very high for assessment and feedback. Navigation and maritime science give generic feedback within days on the DLE, and sociology and law have done some really interesting work around examination feedback, and they've developed an examination toolkit which is again available for you to access online, looking at different ways of giving feedback after exams through script one-to-one meetings and through group feedback. Engineering, got a great example. One academic at times, not all the time, asks students to mark their own papers. Sometimes he's not, and sometimes he hasn't, and then pulls them back in. But it's a great way of student learning. And there's an academic in computing and maths who actually marks scripts with the student alongside. That instant feedback, especially where there's a right and a wrong answer. So we've got some really interesting work going on at Plymouth, and we're aiming for consistency of practice. There's some examples. When we first started this, like everybody else, our assessment and feedback scores were very low. The left-hand column is where we are now. We still got work to do on that 69. We're not happy with some of those feedback scores, but I just wanted to highlight some of the terrific work that some of our colleagues have done about increasing their assessment and feedback NSS scores. There's really been some hard work, and it's really paid off. Just wanted to say that there's lots of resources. That's our website address, and we have a philosophy here that this is external. It's open to everybody, so you're welcome in your institutions to access some of the great stuff that we've got online. So just to thank you and to say this is where you can get all the resources, and I'll be here both at the discussion time and the coffee and the question and answers to answer any further questions. Thank you.